Hello everyone, Soulbag Greg here, and welcome to our first for the Battletech franchise, our Let's Learn How to Play series. There's a lot of things I love about Battletech, from its video games down to its tabletop roots, its extended fiction with the novels, and even the fun little side project like the old Mech Assault series. Today, I'd like to share you the joys of Battletech by trying out a more recent entry to the Battletech lineup for tabletop wargaming, and that is Battletech Alpha Strike. So what is Battletech Alpha Strike, you may ask? Alpha Strike is an attempt to take the very old school, very classic hex-based wargame Battletech, originally released in 1984, and really kick it into high gear. See, Battletech has a lot of deep mechanics involved with the game, and it's great for simulation. However, if you're not really used to the mechanics of the game, or have friends that you play against that are used to mechanics of the game, it can boggle down pretty fast. So a lot of things to keep track of. Each mech has its own equivalent of a 8.5 by 11 character sheet page. And there's a lot of dice and a lot of charts. I mean, that's part of the appeal. But at the same time, for people wanting to get in and do something fun and fast, unless if they know the rules like the back of their hand, a simple engagement between a pair of, or even a lance of mechs, actually, lance versus lance, which is 4 battle mechs versus 4 battle mechs, can turn into an all-night affair. Trust me, I've been there. There's techniques and stuff you learn, and, you know, as you get more up to pace with the rules, it becomes a lot faster. However, trying to do anything above lance versus lance still takes a lot of time and dedication to get running without it turning into a whole, like, weekend affair. So we have Alpha Strike. The key thing with Alpha Strike is that it takes a lot of the mechanical core, the essence of what makes Battletech classic Battletech, and streamlines a lot of it to where the scale of it, as far as your forces, can become that much greater, but only be a fraction of the time it would take to play classic. Biggest thing is that in the original classic game, it's a hex-based board game. It started out as a board game. There are special rules to convert it to inches, but it's always been played on a hex grid. Alpha Strike does the exact opposite. It goes for more of that Warhammer, heavy gear, blitz era of tabletop wargaming using rulers, everything measured in inches. And the damage models has been greatly reduced. Same thing with the weapon profiles. It's much simpler. But it's really manageable. In the time that it would take you to play a lance versus lance in classic, you could literally have 3 times that many, and realistically finish a game even before you would finish a regular classic Battletech game. Now, obviously, Alpha Strike has its strengths and weaknesses. Strength being its speed and just being able to put so much cool stuff on the board and really simplify a lot of things to get games moving. But a lot of the complexities that really make Battletech unique to a lot of people for the classic tabletop can get lost in translation. Not everything scales down accordingly. Certain facts and strategies that you could use with the mechs and different options that are available are either completely like pushed aside or only marginally represented. So tactics will change, how mechs are used will change, just because of the nature of how it's, you know, of the more fast-paced and reduction in mechanical complexity. Does it make it a bad game? No, absolutely not. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. There's plenty of amazing ways to experience Battletech, whether if it's tabletop or video game form, which is how I got into it with MechWarrior 2. But you'll find that with this amazing game universe, there's always a way to experience Battletech, and it won't exactly be one-to-one like it is for the tabletop. You know, even the amazing video games, you know, with the exception of maybe, I think it was 3, and even maybe 4, you don't ever have to worry about your mech falling over, having to do pilot skill rolls, right? Kicking has yet to be introduced. Melee only recently became a thing in MechWarrior 5. Hence why it's been, hence why the Charger has had such a bad reputation among PC MechWarriors as opposed to tabletop. But yeah, I'm hoping that when we go through the step-by-step for each of the phases that would constitute a turn, it may spark your interest to give the tabletop a try, and maybe even eventually finding your way over to Classic Battletech as well. I do plan to do Classic, let's learn how to play Classic Battletech. But since Battletech Aces just recently came out, I'd like to start off with teaching how to play Alpha Strike first, and then we can roll on into how to play Aces. And then eventually make our way back over to Classic, and probably expand through the Total Warfare system. Okay, so Battletech Alpha Strike. This game looks pretty cool, but how do you play it? Well, you get yourself a tabletop, or in this case, we're using Tabletop Simulator. There's a lot of great resources through Tabletop Simulator to download and set up a table via the workshop. I won't exactly go over how you do that in Tabletop Simulator. There's already amazing videos out there that give you a step-by-step on how to do it. But I'll explain both the mechanics as far as if you were just playing on a tabletop, and then how to do the equivalent of that in Tabletop Simulator if this is currently your only way of trying out Alpha Strike. So, in Battletech Tabletop, Alpha Strike, forces typically focus around these super cool guys here, the Battle Mechs. It's the franchise's namesake, the Battle Mech. It's the main frontline unit, the Force Multiplier. It's not the end-all be-all. These guys actually have some great weaknesses compared to more conventional means. We won't really go over that too much. It's mostly going to focus on the mech side of things, but this video gets enough support. People are interested in learning more about other types of frames, vehicle types, infantry, all that fun stuff. We'll make videos detailing that as well. Okay, so basic Alpha Strike. Both sides take alternating turns, going through each phase, in order to outmaneuver and outgun the opponent in a simultaneous activation fashion, and typically see who's the last one left standing. There's various types of mission objectives Not just pure destruction, but also things like Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Breakthrough, and there's a lot of other smaller game modes. But for sake of simplicity, we're just gonna focus on the mech fighting. Go for destruction here. Alright, so in order to play Battletech Alpha Strike, you need the following tools. Ideally, you need 2 players, one against each other. You can have more players join in and just separate who has what. But generally, it's a one versus one affair. However, Battletech Alpha Strike is the first in the franchise. My apologies. Well, I mean, it's technically great. Battletech Alpha Strike has a new solo mode system called Battletech Aces, which is the franchise's first attempt at creating a solo experience outside of PvP. Really excited to dive into that at a later video. But yeah, first and foremost, you need players. Secondly, you need the rules. If you get the box sets, they typically have introductory rules for Alpha Strike. Specifically, if you get the Battletech Alpha Strike box set, it will have the basic rules of what you need in order to play. Other than that, if you want the full rules, Battletech Alpha Strike Commander Edition is the one you're going to want to get. It's the latest version of Alpha Strike. I have the 6th printing, and I think I have one of the later printings. If they made a later printing, I'm not really sure. This one came out like around 2003, I think, or excuse me, 2023. But yeah, you're gonna need that in order to reference the rules. Don't be shocked at how much rules there are in that book, even as light as it is compared to Total Warfare. You're only going to need a handful of rules from the book. A lot of it's more for extra how do I say this? Extra complexity, right? Advanced rules. We're just going to go over the main basics to get you rolling dice. But, you know, if you want to know how an urban warfare environment is, like this kind of area right here, compared to, you know, typical valleys and grasslands with some trees and stuff like that, it'll be in there. Alright, after rules, you're going to need some dice. That's how you determine how things roll, quote-unquote, in this system. Dice is a 2d6 bell curve style game. We got that over here. A single pair of dice is what you will fall back on, but there'll be times where you may have to actually roll 3d6. And that's more in the special rules for like determining initiative and stuff, but you're mostly going to be rolling 2d6 all the time. If you want to roll your dice faster, because there's still going to be a lot of dice rolling in this game, having more d6s in pairs, colored in pairs, so that way they can all be separated, so that way you can just roll them. That. There you go, we got 4 different results immediately. That'll help speed things up a lot in this game. You're also going to need miniatures. Now, unlike other games, which gives you the bare minimum... Actually, they don't even give you the bare minimum, like Warhammer 40k. When you get a starter box from them, that's never enough to do an actual game. It's just enough to give you a little taste. Battletech has always been very generous when it comes to giving you forces for starter boxes. You will have enough, depending on which box you get, in order to play a basic game. And there's plenty of resources out there to either get yourself more mechs or purchase more mechs with the mech boxes. Iron Wind Miniatures also has a big selection of mechs that may not be covered with the plastic mechs. I really enjoy the plastic mechs because of the scaling. See, if you go for like the older era of mechs that were all metal, they may look great, but there's been plenty of times where mechs won't scale properly. It was more about the detailed sculpt, so you may have a small light mech tower over like a medium or heavy mech. That's not an issue when it's a tabletop board game, where it's all just, you know, represented on a board with hexes. But when you actually have to use line of sight to see your enemy, having actual, like, realistically scaled mechs compared to one another is definitely going to go much farther for you. So, however you get the mechs, just make sure you get some mechs. Heck, they can even be paper mechs. Just as long as you have something to represent your mech on the field, should be good. Scale is roughly around 1 over 285 scale. For training enthusiasts out there, that's close to a Z scale for models and terrain. Besides miniatures, you're also going to need unit cards. Unit cards are these little guys here. There you go. We got the Marauder up on there, so we'll just look at the Marauder here. So these unit cards each represent a mech that's on the field. It's going to have a variety of information on here for you. It's going to have the name of the mech, if it's a battle mech you're looking at. It's going to we're going to go over this one right here. So this is the Warhammer. Specifically, it's the Warhammer 8D. Different battle mech builds will have different names associated with them. The point value, this is how you balance a game. You get roughly the same amount of points to have a balanced game between two forces. Up here you have some of its basic stats. So TP, that means the type. This is a BM, which stands for Battle Mech. Different unit types will have different initials to represent what they are. Its size, SZ, is 3. What that means in Battletech speak is that it is a heavy mech. Mechs come in a variety of weight classes, starting with the lightest at light mechs at size 1, medium mechs at size 2, heavy mechs at size 3, and assault mechs at size 4. This will be important when determining melee. Classic Battletech uses tonnage in order to determine like melee attacks as well as fall damage. That's been simplified in this game. Instead, it's going to really rely on your size number. So keep that in mind when we get to the melee and part of this video. TMM, that is the target movement modifier. So if this mech is at a standstill, if you attempt to shoot at the mech, it's going to be a lot easier than it is if you're shooting at a moving target. This target movement modifier represents that with a number. The higher the number, the harder it is to hit a moving target. This one has a TMM of 1, so as long as it moves farther than 1 inch, it'll get that TMM of 1. MV is the movement value. So this mech has a movement value of 8 inches. Some mechs will have special movement abilities, typically jump jets. So you may see a mech with the notation, let's see if we can actually find one here. There we go. Movement value 10J. That means that this thing can either move normally on the ground at 10 inches, or it can use its special movement, a J, to jump 10 inches. Now, there's going to be some caveats to jumping, and we'll get to that when we cross that bridge, but just keep in mind, if you see a letter, the letter J, next to the movement value in inches, that is what it is noting. Next here we have the role brawler. So battle mechs have fulfill a particular role on the battlefield, whether or not they're frontline battle mechs meant to push and hold the line, skirmishers that are meant to go in, scrap really fast, and then bug out, snipers or missile boats that tend to hang back and provide long-range artillery support, so on and so forth. There's all sorts of different types of roles that can be fulfilled, and if you're playing the more advanced rules, having certain battle mech roles fulfilled can grant you additional bonuses outside of what the cards actually state. We won't go over that here in this game. That is something we can cover in a future video if you guys are interested, but just keep in mind that is why we have the different roles. It's a quick way to reference what this mech specializes in, and whether or not you can get bonuses for having a lance or star of battle mechs with certain roles fulfilled. After that we have skill. This is your skill number. In regular classic Battletech, you usually have a gunnery number and a piloting number. That, once again, has been reduced and simplified in Alpha Strike. Instead, you have a skill number that you use for both shooting, melee, and any piloting rolls you have to make. In the next category here, we have damage, followed by the letters SML with a number next to it and some numbers underneath. This signifies how much damage output you can deliver to another mech if you manage to hit at either short range for the S, medium range for the M, long range for the L. So this particular mech can dish out 4 points of damage for short and medium range, but once it gets to long range, that gets reduced to 2 points. The number here next to the range, or next to the ranges, indicates the penalty that you will receive for your target number, which is the number they have to hit when you're attempting to roll. Ow! Like that. Hey, Noel, hope you're doing well. Morning, happy holidays, yep. Thanks for the burgers. So these numbers here are your target movement modifier. That's up here. These are your range modifiers. And when we get to the combat and how you determine the target number you have to hit, these will come into play. We'll explain more about that later. Just know that in the basic rules, there's short range, medium range, and long range. There are a couple more range bands, but those are more advanced rules. We won't get into that right now. You have over here the OV, which means overheat value. It has an overheat value of 1. So, in the world of Battletech, battle mechs are incredibly big, incredibly powerful, lethal walking machines of death. that comes at a trade-off. In order to power these behemoths of machinery, they have fusion engines, basically nuclear equipped walking death mobiles. So they receive a lot of power to do all the stuff that they do. What that also means is that it generates a lot of heat. So in the classic Battletech, anything that you do, if you move, if you shoot, you know, a lot of other factors will bring up your heat. You have what are called heat sinks, devices designed specifically to draw heat away from your mech to keep your mech cool. Otherwise, you risk overheating and either shutting down or worse, exploding from the heat due to internal factors such as ammo cooking off if it got too hot, literally cooking your own pilot in the cockpit. Not great. In Alpha Strike, that idea still exists, just very simplified. It's kind of this, as you see the theme here. When you move and you fire your battle mech or your omni mech, it's assumed that you're doing so to try and keep your heat nominal. And so you're only outputting your movement and your shooting to where if you do all that, you're not going to start heating up your mech. OV here, the overheat value, represents if you want to push your mech a little harder to get some extra damage out of either the short range or medium range brackets, you can do that. However, you're going to have to start filling in these little heat scales in order to get that trade-off. We'll go over what those trade-offs exactly are when we reach that point, but just keep in mind, that's why this is here. If you never worry about overheating your mech, you almost never have to worry about falling sun. Unless if you're getting hit like flamer weapons or something like that. Over here is the mech's armor and structure values. So this mech here, the Warhammer, has, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points of armor and 6 points of internal structure. As your mech gets damaged, you start clicking these. Once you run out, any additional damage goes into your structure, which is not good. Structure damage could mean a number of things: reduced weapon accuracy or additional heating. When you fire your weapons, movement value may drop, or your weapon output may drop as well. Once again, much more simplified compared to the complexity of critical hits that is available in a regular classic game. Down here is anything special. So this mech here has the C3S case and MHQ1. These are all special abilities, which you can look up in the book. I think I have the... Let's see here. Do I have this here? Is this... This might not be it. The table I have here has a lot of... different rules and things. Fortunately, it doesn't cover all of them. I'm not sure if it covers it here. It may be something deeper in the book, but if it becomes a factor, we'll look it up. But just know that that is what that is there for. It is very specific special rules for your mech. Over here is your critical hits table. So Once again, if you start taking critical hits from structure damage and it actually affects you, you apply it here. And yeah, this is how you determine the status of your mech. Nice thing about these Alpha Strike cards is that you can print these out for free by going to the Master Units List website. So you can look up virtually any unit you want, and they should have a Alpha Strike card equivalent there. You can do that, or you can go purchase the actual Alpha Strike card packs that are for sale for different eras. And then, what else do you need in order to play this game? You need a tape measure. As stated before, this game specializes on tape measures. Or, I should, why does it keep clicking? One second, let me make sure there's nothing weird going on here. Okay, it's locked. Alright. I want to make sure I don't accidentally, like, take the floorboard out of my table. That would, and everything falls. That would be very awkward. You're gonna need a tape measure. Everything here is played off of a there's gonna be no visible markings to show you how far you move like you would in Classic, since that is a board game and this is a tabletop war game equivalent. So everything has to be measured out. It's all measured in inches. So you're going to make sure you want to have that tool handy. And then for tabletop and terrain, 4x4 to a 6x4 foot is what's recommended. Some of the scenarios are simple 4x4 feet, but if you want the full tabletop wargame experience, you're going to bring that up to a 6 foot by 4 foot, which is what this table here represents. And you're going to want terrain to kind of break up the line of sights, give yourself a little more unique things to work around. Once again, if you get the box sets, they usually will have some sort of paper terrain in there that you can set up. Or you can purchase or make your own terrain. Just as long as it's within 285 scale or Z scale like we talked about before. And yeah, that's what you need in order to play a game. So let's see if there's anything I'm forgetting here before we move on. Not really. There's a lot of little specific things here and there, like how you build a force. We're not going to go over that. That is a whole other video that can be made. We want to start slinging dice here. Just know that typical forces are usually 4v4 affairs in Classic. In Alpha Strike, it's more 12v12 or 12v10 if you're dealing with clanners. Hey, Zablade Storm, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. Oh. Yeah, they have a chart here for a typical force. If you're starting out, the best way to play a game if you're focusing on earlier eras before the clan invasion, so that would be before 3050. You're typically going to have a company for your formation of battle mechs. A company's worth is 3 lances. Each lance equals 4 battle mechs, so that is a total of 12 battle mechs. I would recommend starting with however many mechs you think you would be comfortable with, since even though this is a faster game, there's still a lot going on, and the more forces you put on the table, the longer it's going to take. So just keep that in mind. Best thing is just make sure you agree with your opponent what the rough point value equivalent you'd like for the force to be, so that way you both can match each other. But just keep in mind that's generally a basic size force for Alpha Strike. Right. Once you've figured out what forces you and your opponent would like to set up, as you can see here, I have a command lance, a battle lance, and a recon lance. My opponent has, I think it might be the same thing. I don't remember if I copy and pasted this. Oh, maybe not. No. It's a little different. Yeah, they're close to the exact same points wise. We're not going to use all of them. We're just going to use just a few of them, just for examples. But once you figure out how much points each side is going to have, if you're just doing just a straight up brawl, right? So a destruction mode, where whoever destroys the most wins. Generally, having the same point value is good. There will be other game scenarios where one may have double the amount of point values over the other. If it's like a defend and hold mission or prevent a breakthrough with garrison units, that'll all change. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to go with simple destruction rules. So we have two forces with their mechs picked, balancing out their point values. Once you do that, according to the scenario, it'll determine whether or not which side of the table edge you come on, or if you have mechs already on the table. For this example, we already have a couple mechs on here. And we're going to shift them around in different areas, just kind of show different rules and stuff. But in order to start a game after you have your mechs purchased and ready to go, you're typically going to start the sequence of play doing an initiative roll. That is one of 4 phases for a Battletech turn. Once you do your initiative phase, you're going to move to the movement phase. Once you figure out everyone's movement and everyone is moved, you then move to the combat phase. Once combat has taken place and has been fully resolved, you then move to the end phase. The end phase is executing any miscellaneous actions remaining in the turn, such as removing destroyed units, or restarting instead of shut down. Once that's all done, you go back up to step 1 with the initiative phase again. You keep repeating these until one side meets its victory condition for the scenario. So, starting with step 1, the initiative phase, each player is going to roll 2d6 and add the result together to determine initiative. So pretty much every roll in Battletech, you're always adding the numbers together, hence why it is operating on a bell curve. 7 being the highest number you will get, odds are, as far as like the probability of hitting a 7 is the highest. The lower or higher number from that, probability of getting that will start to go way down. So we're gonna roll for red guy and blue guy here. So we'll go red, blue. Red guy rolled 9, blue guy rolled 8. So, what does that mean? Whoever rolls highest wins initiative. If you tie, you have to roll again. There's some other factors that can change it, like I believe skill, pilot skill, abilities. Did I say that right? Here, let me check. Let me check a second. Oh. Special pilot abilities, excuse me, SPAs. You may have something, either a skill pilot ability or something granted by your commander, your HQ commander, that may give you additional bonuses, or a scenario modifier that may change things. But typically, you're just going to roll a flat 2d6 and see whoever gets highest. So, red guy over here, he got the highest roll. That makes him the initiative winner. Blue guy over here is the initiative loser. So what does that mean? Well, this part usually throws people in the loop just because of the nature of how some war games are played. But what it means is that the initiative loser, being this guy, has to move first, has to declare his attacks first, and has to roll attacks and distribute damage first. Well, hold on a second, you may be saying. I thought this guy was the initiative winner. He is. However, in Battletech, the one thing that's very unique compared to other war games, say for instance Warhammer 40k, is that unlike that game, this game tries to simulate simultaneous activations. What that means is when one side does things, other side does thing doesn't get resolved until the very end of the turn. So it kind of simulates everything happening at the same time. So if you're hoping to get your shots off first, that doesn't matter in Battletech because it's all going to be applied at the same time. What matters is essentially revealing your battle plan, revealing your hand to your opponent, and giving them the foresight to react to what you're doing, putting you much more at a disadvantage than them. And that's what we're simulating here. He lost initiative, so he has to essentially show his hand and what he's planning on doing first, giving red guy here the ability to react to it. Once that's done, we go into the movement phase. Just as a brief explanation of this phase. So, like we said, whoever loses initiative has to move their mechs first. If both sides have an equal amount of units, typically the loser moves one first, then the winner moves one, then the loser moves one, so on and so forth, until everybody has moved that turn. If the number of units per side is unequal, then players with the higher number of units must move more units in proportion to that of their opponent. We'll get to that when we actually get to detailing the movement phase. But typically, it's you move one, then the other player moves one, and you go back and forth till everyone is moved. Unless it's unequal number of units, then it usually is one moves and then the other moves until one has a multiplier of number of forces as the opponent, in which the one with the higher multiplier moves more compared to the other player, you know, in order to make sure everybody gets moved with the least amount of discrepancy. So it's win to see your opponent's hand, then play to negate. Yes, you are winning the initiative. So this guy here, he wants to move, right? He has a movement of 10 inches. So he can choose to either not move or move. So let's see, we're gonna set it up to where we just have to hold. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. Well, in Tabletop Simulator, there is a method to grab a piece, and then when you move it, it'll measure the base to see how far you move. Just for the sake of moving on, we'll just say he moves over here, right? Like, maybe he didn't want to engage in that Warhammer. And then this Warhammer reacts saying, oh, he's moving that way? Alright, well, I will do a sprint. So that way I can try closer to him, because he's trying to run away from me. And then I can try and set up and try and maybe hopefully get behind him next turn. Once all the movement is done, you move on to the combat phase. Now, same thing with movement phase. The initiative is going to determine who will reveal what their plan is as far as attacking goes first. So, if this side, the blue side, had multiple forces out here, they would each declare who they're attacking, or they can declare if they're spotting for somebody, and declare whether or not it's a ranged attack, and if it's a specialized ranged attack, or if it's a melee attack if they're in base contact. Afterwards, once they have declared everything, the red forces here will declare everything, the initiative winner would declare everything. And then once that's been declared, everybody rolls dice, track your hits, see who hits, apply damage, roll any possible critical hits if that is required, and continue to do so until everybody has shot and everything has been resolved. Now, like what we were saying earlier, this is simultaneous, so if this guy here, we'll pretend like he actually didn't go behind that building there. He shoots the red guy here. The Griffin shoots the Warhammer. We can pretend that maybe the Warhammer came into this fight damaged, and maybe he has all of his armor destroyed, and just like maybe a couple of structure bubbles that haven't been marked out, but everything else is marked out. And the Griffin here actually managed to hit him enough to where it will theoretically destroy this battle mech. During the shooting phase, or during combat phase, this mech will get destroyed, but not until the very end, because it's simultaneous. So if he's in range and has the ability to do so, he can return fire on this Griffin and maybe granted much needed payback, especially if we know that this guy's going to go out. So everyone exchanges fire between all the different units. Once that's all been completely resolved, you then go to the end phase. So you resolve any destroyed units, so maybe this Warhammer's gone. Maybe this unit used overheating value and is now needs to have the overheating, or needs to have the heat value increased, as well as any other special rules that may need to be activated during the end phase. The end phase is really kind of the cleanup phase. And yeah, you'll go through all that. Once that's all been resolved, you'll determine whether or not one side completed their objectives in order to win the scenario, or if a new initiative is required. So this game doesn't typically have a set number of turns like Warhammer 40k does. Excuse me. This game doesn't have a set number of turns like Warhammer 40k does. This game is pretty much you keep going until either one side is victorious or one side throws in the towel. Some scenarios do have timer limits, but for the most part, it's, you know, you keep going until it is done. Rip and tear it until it is done. Okay, so that is a super basic explanation of going through the 4 phases. Now, let's go through the details of each phase. So we're going to bring these guys over here. Once again, we're going to go back to the initiative phase, so we're going to roll the dice. Click update there. Alright, blue guy has 1 initiative, red guy has lost initiative, so he's going to show his hand first. So Tabletop 40k doesn't have objective-based scenarios. It does. It's all objective-based scenarios. It's just that it has a timer for objective-based scenarios. Battletech, Tabletop, Classic, and Alpha Strike typically doesn't. There's no timer. You just keep going until it's done. Warhammer 40k typically ends around like 5 to 7 turns. But unless if it's specifically mentioned in Battletech Classic or Battletech Alpha Strike for its scenario, you just keep going until one side is victorious or the other side throws in the towel. Okay. Alright, so this guy's the initiative winner, so that means this guy is going to have to reveal himself first for his movement phase. So, when it comes to movement, I have to go over a few things here. We have to determine whether or not these things can actually move. There's a chance that a battle mech may actually be immovable. So he's either mobile or immobile. Things may happen to the structure of this battle mech and its motive functions so destroyed that if it can't move at least 1 inch, or if it can move 0 inches, it is considered immobile. That has its own set of penalties or bonuses, depending on your viewpoint, when you try to attack this thing. But if it can move at least 1 inch movement, it is still considered a mobile unit. If a unit begins the movement phase unable to move on its own, whether it's immobile, shut down, or being transported, carried, or towed, this unit does not receive movement this turn. Minimum movement. So, battle mechs have to spend inches in order to move. The Warhammer here has, I believe it was 8 inches? 8 inches. So that's like a full run. Okay, let me see if I can get this working to where... Let's see here. I had it working to where if you grab a model, it'll automatically measure it for you. I had it set up, and for some reason it's not doing that. It's not great. That's really weird. Maybe hands? No. Option... Grid, maybe? Okay, since we're playing tabletop, we don't really want this to snap. It would make more sense if we were playing like a hex-based game. You know, we would use this with the snapping. But in this case, we don't want to do that. I know there's a way to measure. Okay, well, I'll figure that in a moment. So typically, when you move a mech, you're going to want to measure from the front. This thing can move 8 inches. We'll just say 5, so like right there. You're going to want to move the mech until its front reaches that measurement. You don't want to measure from the front and then end its movement with that measurement reaching the back, because that won't be the same measurement. You have to measure in the same spot. So if you're going to move forward, typically measuring from the forward portion of the mech at the base, specifically at the base here, that's how you want to do for moving. Now, tabletop sim, usually you're going to grab a mech, and then you're going to want to hold the tab key, and that will show you the measurement from the center, and then wherever you drop it off, it'll make that measurement. Now, it was showing... let's see. We want to do 2D measurement for that. So that way, as you can see here, it's not adding any height to that measurement, so it's keeping it clean. So we want to move it 6 inches right there. We can do that. And if we want to rotate it anywhere we want, we can do that. In classic Battletech, moving or rotating your mech is how you get it to move and turn, or turn and move. Alpha Strike, it doesn't really worry about that. Just measure wherever you want, and then once you reach your destination, rotate it to however you wish. This will come into play. Mechs have a front arc and a back arc in Alpha Strike. Classic, they have left and right arcs as well, but in Alpha Strike, you just focus on the front and the back. Front arc is everything after the rear part of the base, and the rear arc is everything on this side. So we'll put him right. We'll put him right here. We'll pretend that for some reason he didn't see this guy. He's busy moving this way. The Griffin here, he's gonna make his move. Right there. About 7-inch move right there. That works. We'll rotate him around like that. Hey, Candace Fox, hope you're doing well. Pleasure to have you here. Okay. A little bit of some basic movement. So, minimum movement. If a unit is mobile, it can always move 2 inches in any direction, regardless of the terrain movement costs that may prohibit it. Feeling under the weather? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So, battle mechs, as we had mentioned before, have a certain amount of range they can move according to the amount of inches that are allowed in their movement value. That is assuming you are moving on a nice smooth surface like this. If you move through, let's say, more difficult terrain like trees here, like a tree terrain, that's actually going to reduce the amount of inches you have available to move. Or if you were to scale a hill here, that will have its own movement requirements that will also reduce the amount of inches you have available. And yeah, why not? We'll demonstrate that here. We're gonna put this guy back over here. Actually, we'll put him over here just to make it easier. So the Griffin has a 10-inch move. Can jump, but we're not going to work on that right now. So we're going to pretend he starts here. He can usually move 10 inches. However, he decides he's going to move into the forest to get cover for any possible future attacks that may come against him. So let's see. We'll just put him back right there. We'll measure from here to here. Okay, so that's about 2 inches. So if we wanted to move him into the tree line, we would get 2 inches of normal movement. And then for every inch of movement we do inside of a wood area, specifically light woods, it would cost us, I believe it is 1 inch of additional movement. Let me get the, let's see here. So everybody, you'll have this available in your book. It is the movement cost table. As you can see, base move is just 1 inch movement. Through clear areas like what we were doing there, it won't cost you anything additional. Paved roads and bridges won't cost you anything additional. However, they do have their own little special rules associated with that. Going through rough terrain, rubble, and woods, you have to add 1 inch to your movement. If you're going into water, as long as it's the surface movement or it's a depth 0, it won't add any additional inches you have to add to your movement. At depth 1, it'll be 1 additional inch of movement. Depth 2 under. That says 6 inches. That is not correct. That should be 3 inches. 3 inch plus, or plus 3 inches. So, this is woods. In classic Battletech, they have different levels of woods. So light woods is very light. Doesn't provide much as far as difficulty for your opponent to shoot in, but also doesn't cost you as much movement points to move into it. For Alpha Strike, what that means is that 2 inches, we reach about right there. We'll move him into here, right? Assume that's 2 inches. Say I want to move right there. How far is it from here to there? Another 2 inches. So I spent 2 inches getting from there to here, which means I have 8 inches left over from 10, right? We want to move another 2 inches into here. In order to do that, we have to spend additional inches to represent the mech taking longer and being more careful with its movement to not run into any heavy trees or light trees. So in order to do that, we move. So 1 inch in, we have to add an additional inch to that, so that's 2 inches there. Another inch here. We have to add another inch there, so that's a total of 4 inches in order to move 2 inches inward. That's a total of 4 inches, making that a total of 6 inches for the entire move. If we wanted to move further, we could, but for the sake of tacticalness, this Griffin has got quite the surprise for this Warhammer. Now, say you want to move up or down a hill. Like, say this is actually pretty nice. We'll grab another mech for this example. What are we getting here? Locust. Here, come here. So same thing. The Locust wants to move up to the top of the hill, get a better vantage point. We'll measure out to see where it is. Okay, so about 1.7 inches. Let's move it a little further back so that way it's nice solid whole numbers. 2 inches right there. All right. So we're going to spend 2 inches to get from there to here. Let's see, how much movement does this guy have? This guy is a size 1 light mech. These guys can haul ass. They don't have much armor. Look at how much armor they have. They got nothing for armor, but they're great as scouts and being able to act as spotters. This guy can move 16 inches. This guy can fly like crazy. So he wants to get up here. So in order to get from here to here, we have to do a couple things. First, we're going to measure horizontally. And the way we do that here on Tabletop Sim is that we're going to push the P key until we go from third person to top-down camera. So that way it's much easier to... There you go, see? We assume it touches it right there. That's 2 inches to go from here to here. Now he wants to move a little further in. We'll just say 2 inches right there. Okay. In order to move up or down in elevation, just like when we're walking through woods, we have to spend additional inches in order to represent the additional difficulty and slowing of the mech to move further in. And the way it's done that for elevation is that you have to spend 2 inches per every 1 inch of elevation scaled. There's a reason that that particular conversion exists in this game. There we go. The reason it's not 1 inch, like you may think, is that the scale difference. This game is based off of... This game is a tabletop version, faster version of Battletech Classic, which utilizes a different scale for its hex maps. The hex maps are built to fit on a table, so the scale horizontally is actually reduced compared to the verticality. So in Battletech Classic, if a mech wanted to move 1 hex in front of it that was going up in elevation, the 1 hex would equal 1 movement point, and then in order to, let's say, move up from a level 0, which we'll just say this is level 0 here, up to a level 1 hex, it would have to spend 1 movement point to approach the hex to get into it, and then 1 additional movement point per the elevation change, up to no more of a max of 2 per hex change, in order to make that ascent. But as you caught on, we're not spending 1 additional inch to go from here to here. We're spending 2 inches. And like I said, it's because of scale. Classic Battletech has everything horizontally scaled down, so that way it fits on the board. We don't have that issue. We're using big old tables. So the mechs are actually going to be to scale with the rest of the terrain here. So in order to represent that, instead of 1 movement point equaling 1 inch of distance like you would naturally think it would, it actually represents 2 inches of movement on a tabletop. Hence why if you have, hence why if you are a mech that is still mobile, no matter how many negative movement penalties you have, you still are guaranteed to have at least have 2 inches of movement. In Classic Battletech, that means 1 movement point. Kind of see where we're going with this? So in order to go from elevation 0 inches to elevation 1 inches, you have to spend 2 additional inches of movement to scale that 1 inch. So Alpha Strike, think of Alpha Strike as the horizontal scale is stretched out to be more realistic with the distances. However, in order to compensate with the verticality of the elevation, the verticality movement requirements for the amount of inches that need to be spent are double. So let's see how we do it here on Tabletop Sim. Right now we have the measurement set to 2D, right? It's very easy to just measure things horizontally. However, we want to go from here up to here. This doesn't do a great job when we're sticking with 2D. We're going to switch it to 3D. We go from here. That's still an issue, right? It's not taking account not just the distance but also the height. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see, we have the ruler set so we can just measure anywhere. So if you hold down the shift key and then click and drag, you now have 2 separate values. You have the horizontal value in inches and the vertical value in inches. So if we're just measuring here to here, that's 3 inches of horizontal movement, 0 inches of vertical movement. Now we're going to take this and we're going to go bang. All right. So we want to go 2 inches to get on top of there. That is a 1 inch elevation change. So in order to make this movement here 2 inches in, we have to spend 2 additional inches per inch there. So that is a total of, what is that, 6 inches, right? 2 inches in, and then for each inch of movement, that's 2 additional inches on top of that. Yeah, so 1 turns into 3, and then another 3, and then bam. We are now up here. Look at that. Now that's 2 inches, as you can see here. This map here has these cool little pop-up things, little pop-up hints. So remember, it is 2 inches per 1 inch of elevation. If you're scaling up to, if you're scaling an inch of horizontal movement, but it's bringing you up to 2 inches of elevation change instead of 1 inch of elevation change, then it's going to be another plus 2 inches for how much you have to spend to move on top of that. To my knowledge, if I remember correctly, you cannot increase your elevation higher than a 2-inch elevation change per inch of movement. So you can't run up a hill that's going to change up to 3 inches worth of an elevation change for a 1-inch horizontal movement. You can't do it. It's just too steep. Or at least it's too steep for battle mechs. That may not be the case for other units, but just bear in mind, if you want to move up or down hills, you can't do it with any steeper of an elevation change of 2 inches over a 1-inch horizontal movement. Let's see, you got some questions in chat here. Can a body of water be too deep to move through? No, actually. Battle mechs are completely capable of being completely submerged in water. They can even fight underwater. However, their capability is drastically reduced, as that's not necessarily what they were designed for. Hey, how you doing, Soviet? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the love and support. Yeah, so you actually have aquatic units that specialize in underwater combat. Battle mechs typically are not that. They are meant for land battles. But if the need arises, you can fully submerge your mech, either to help cool them down faster, or hide them from the enemy and possibly set up an ambush. Just bear in mind, these battle mechs are completely sealed. However, if there is a critical hit that would negate that, your pilot's gonna die in crushing depth water. That's more of a thing for Battletech Classic. They have rules for that. I don't know if they have they probably have rules for that, for the advanced rules. For Alpha Strike, we're not going to go over that, at least not for this video. But just keep in mind that is the idea. Okay, let me make sure I go over anything else that needs to be talked about when it comes to battle mechs and movement. Let's see here. I don't think anything else when it comes to level changes need to be discussed. Okay. So yeah, water, yeah, as you mentioned, moving through water, these guys can do it. It will cost them more to go through water. And unlike regular elevations, which starts at level 0, then goes up to level 1, level 2, level 3, any areas that have water have depth to them. So if you're at level 0, you're on just the flat ground. If you're at, I think it's depth 0, I think you're like up to your feet. I think depth 1, you're up to your like waist in water. Depth 2, I believe you're fully submerged. For quick reference, these battle mechs here are typically 2 levels high. Obviously, when you're eyeballing it, there may be some discrepancy on whether or not you can see a mech. But typically these guys are 2 levels high, so if you put them in depth 2 water, they should be fully submerged. Yep, I'm double checking the rules here. That is correct. So they need to be in at least 2 inches of depth for water in order to be considered completely submerged. Let's see some additional rules for water movement, if that is what you're planning to do here. If an underwater unit had the UMU special ability or has the submarine movement type, it may move as a submarine unit. Otherwise, for depths up to 30 inches, the unit must move along the bottom of the water feature via underwater ground movement, spending 4 inches of movement per travel, plus all standard movement costs for changing levels from one depth to another. Yeah, so that +3 we were seeing earlier, so every 1 inch of movement you do underwater, like completely submerged underwater, it's going to also require 3 additional inches added on top of that in order to move 1 inch, so it's technically 4 inches of movement. Now over here, we have payment. Typically, battle mechs will be fighting on like clear terrain or rough terrain. There you go, Raven, you're going to be used for this example. But there will be times you'll be coming across man-made structures like roads. Roads are really good when it comes to moving certain types of units, like wheeled units will typically get a bonus. They can typically move faster along a road than other vehicles can. Battle mechs here actually technically perform better on just good old-fashioned rough ground, or just, you know, plains, or anything that's not super hard and slick. Roads, unfortunately, are that. And while you can put a battle mech on a road, it doesn't really get any bonuses to its movement, at least not that I remember. But it can receive a penalty of possibly falling over if you sprint an Alpha Strike. In normal classic Battletech, if you move a battle mech along the road and then you decide to turn and continue moving, there's a chance you're going to fall and scrape metal and damage your mech, and even possibly damage the pilot. At least that's how it's handled in classic Battletech. And Alpha Strike, it looks like they simplified it to where if you declare a sprint while you're on the road, anywhere on the road, you're gonna have to roll to see whether or not you fall. But as long as you're just moving normally, that shouldn't be an issue. Let's see here. Ooh, nice, on a 10 stream streak. Nice, I appreciate that, Soviet. Is the road just as smooth? Yeah, so, you know, these battle mechs are big, they're heavy. You know, they have chicken walker feet, or they have stumpy feet. These things can really, like, claw into the ground and do really well in all terrain. But once they start getting in the pavement here, things get a little slippery. Some additional rules when it comes to roads. Let's see here. For starters, all ground units that travel exclusively on the road, so if you start and end your movement on a road here, only pay 1 inch of movement per inch traveled, plus the terrain costs for any level change. That's huge. This means that even if the road passes through wooden terrain, the woods are not counted as long as the ground unit remains on the paved surface the entire time. So if this road went through these woods here, and then changed elevations up to these hills, all those modifiers that we talked about earlier for additional inch costs do not apply. As long as you're on that road. The only thing that'll apply is the level changes. But as far as the additional inches required to go through areas like woods and stuff. That doesn't change. The only stuff that still does apply is your elevation change. And then in addition to that, ground vehicles with either wheeled or tracked. That's spend their entire movement on a pavement, receive an additional 2 inches of movement to spend. So yeah, the roads are very good for vehicles, but like I said, we're focusing on battle mechs, so that doesn't really help us. It only helps us when we want to try and avoid spending additional inches traveling through tougher terrain like woods. Okay, let's see. We're going to avoid all the different other types of movements because that does not apply to the battle mech. Okay, now we're going to talk about different movement modes. Battle mechs have a wide range of modes that they can choose from. The Raven here can move a total of 12 inches. Actually, you know what? No. Let's go for the Phoenix Hawk. Hey, you just got your lucky number. Just don't tell Harmony Gold. There you go. We'll represent with this guy. So the Phoenix Hawk. Phoenix Hawk can move a total of 12 inches, and it has the capability to use jump jets. So if you just want to move normally across the surface, that is considered ground of movement. So you can move however you'd like, anywhere you want via the ground. You pay for penalties to move through various areas, as we had discussed before. For the Phoenix Hawk, that was what, 12 inches? Yeah, 12 inches. A lot of these mechs generally function much better in the tabletop than in video games. The video game doesn't do a lot of justice. I mean, that is true with specific examples. However, I would argue that in the video games, they all get a pass when it comes to movement, because you're never going to fail a piloting skill roll in any MechWarrior game, or at least not in, if you're not including 3 and 4. Like, you don't have to worry about like falling damage to your mech or your MechWarrior. Maybe if you do like a real big fall, the legs might get damaged a little bit, but other than that, these guys aren't actually like falling down. Well, that's a bad way to represent it. How do I do that here? I thought there was a way to do that. Ah, well, you know what I mean. Falling forward, falling to the side, taking damage. That's not a thing in the MechWarrior series. So you don't have to worry about that. You do have to worry about in this game. So yeah, as long as you're just doing quote-unquote normal movement, that is considered ground movement for a battle mech. If you do less than 1 inch worth of movement with your battle mech, so maybe say you nudge them over just a little bit, or you just rotate them, and it's not enough to go it's not enough to go an inch or more, that mech is considered at a standstill. It did not use ground movement. Now, while that makes him easier to hit, that also makes it easier for you to declare and shoot an enemy during the combat phase. Now let's get into the specialization of the Phoenix Hawk here, jump jets. Since he has a J in that movement profile, he can use the jump jets. So, jump jets, you can move 12 inches? Yeah. So you can move 12 inches horizontally. And as far as elevation goes, you technically can move up, like, elevation change-wise, like, up to elevation 6, which is basically like, what is that? Yeah. So, horizontally, remember, you multiply everything by 2 to increase the horizontal scale. Vertically, it's half. So this guy has 12-inch horizontal movement, but if we need to scale something vertically, let's see, we'll get the measurement here. So if you want to go up this, for example, that's a 3.8-inch elevation change to get to the top. That's still within 6 inches of vertical movement, so he could use his jump jets to move and place right on that hill. Now, jumping units ignore terrain costs for the purpose of movement and may jump in any direction, regardless of its origin of facing. So all that pesky, like, additional inches that we talked about, we don't have to worry about for jumping. That's part of the beauty of jumping, is that you basically jump over a lot of the BS. Now, for some legalities when it comes to jumping. In order for a jump to be considered legal, the jumping unit also has to be able to clear any terrain it is attempting to pass over. And as we just discussed before, when jumping, the jumping unit can jump over any terrain up to half its jump movement rating, rounded down, plus its starting elevation. So a unit with 6 inches of jump to move standing on a 2-inch high hill can jump 5 inches high and may jump over a 2-inch tall building on top of a 3-inch high hill. And since this hill here is within 6 inches of vertical movement, we were able to clear it. Now, when you're jumping downward, such as off a cliff or building, if you have jump jets, it's no problem. They jump safely. Now, I believe if you're trying to jump on an enemy, that's different, and that may require a pilot skill roll to make sure you don't fall. Certain types of terrain, when you enter into them, like I believe like dangerous, like rubble terrain, may actually require a pilot skill roll to ensure that you're not going to fall over. If you fall over, you take damage. It's not good for anybody. Let's see here. Let me find an example of that, actually. Let's see, what environments do we have that moving into it would actually cause issues? Do, 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 do. There's no reason for a Phoenix Hawk not to use jump jets. Yep. I literally had a nasty setup that was Char in Battletech form. Downing assault mechs by jumping right behind them and blasting them in the back with snub-nosed PPCs and lasers. That's an oof. Alright, let me double check for PSRs when it comes to movement, because usually in classic Battletech they're a lot more clear about it, because it's more of a factor. That might not be as much of a factor for the Alpha Strike version, but let me make sure I'm not leaving out the PSRs when it comes to movement here before we move on. Okay, well, I'm not seeing it right off the bat, so we can run into it, we'll go over it, but just know that there are times where you may have to make what's called a pilot skill roll in order to not fall down. I don't think that's normally the case in Alpha Strike, but I'll just to give you an idea, you know, if you run into an area that may be highly unstable, or if you mess up a kick, or you take too much damage and you don't know if you're gonna stay on top of your stay balanced and stay on your feet, you may have to make a PSR, otherwise you're going to hit the ground. Once again, that is typical for classic. It's been a minute since I ran through those rules for Alpha Strike, so at the moment it doesn't seem like there's rules for that outside of when you're sprinting on a road, but if it does come up, I will let you know. Alright, and then just to get through the last part of the movement phase. As we had mentioned earlier, water. So units with jumping capability may jump into water depth of 1 inch or greater, but not out of it. Depth 0 water does not limit jumping movement. So if you're inside water, you're going to have to use ground movement in order to get up to a 0 depth of water. You can't just, like, use your jump jets to fly out of the water. It don't work that way. But once you hit a depth 0 water, you can then use jump jet movement in future movement turns. And then last but not least, when it comes to the movement portion, at least as it pertains to battle mechs, is sprinting. Any ground unit may use the sprinting movement. In order to find out how to make these guys sprint, we have to multiply its current move by 1.5 and round up. Thus, a unit with a current move of 12. This is a unit, by the way. A unit is... I didn't explain that earlier. A unit is any offensive type, whether it's battle mechs, infantry, tanks, VTOLs, things like that. those are all considered units. So anytime you hear a unit, that is what it's referring to generally. So this unit here, this battle mech, has 12 inches of movement. If we were to declare a sprint, that would be 18 inches of movement. However, even though we declare a sprint, the target movement modifier for moving does not increase with a sprint. It remains the same. Just as long as we make up to 1 inch or more of movement, we get our target movement modifier. That'll be important once we start slinging lead in the combat phase. Okay, so let's do that one example. We got a battle mech that is on pavement here. He decides he wants to move. He can move 12 inches right there, but say something's really important and he needs to get as close enough as possible, maybe to like attack someone over here. And if he gets even closer, he can go down 1 range bracket and have less of a penalty. So he's going to push it, and he's going to announce a sprint. So that means he'll get 18 inches of movement. This is the one time where we are going to have to use a PSR roll. Okay, let me go over the specifics of sprinting and possibly skidding. Skidding rules in classic Battletech is no joke. It's like 6 pages worth of rules and examples to explain how skidding works. Because skidding can do all sorts of stuff. Skidding can accidentally turn your battle mech into a battering ram. And depending on what it hits, a whole flurry of other rules will have to start applying. Thankfully, a lot of that doesn't really apply in Alpha Strike. Once I get around to actually talking about classic Battletech on how to play, I will most likely have an entire video just dedicated purely to the skidding rules. But just bear in mind, it's skidding in this in Alpha Strike. It's a lot simpler. Although it used to be, if you just moved an inch or more as a battle mech on the roads here, you would have to roll for possible skidding, which I hated. I thought that was the dumbest thing. Now it looks like it only applies if you declare a sprint, which I think is fair. That's much more reasonable of a approach to that. Okay, let me focus on skidding. Alright. Alright, so in order to possibly skid, skidding is the unintentional effect of moving too fast on a paved or icy surface, and is a hazard to mechs, proto-mechs, and ground vehicles that use a tracked or wheeled movement. Skidding is more likely with units that produce a higher momentum, and thus it tends to be a bigger problem for faster units than it is for slower ones. Hence why sprinting is now the possible trigger that we'll have to check for. Mechs, proto-mechs, or ground vehicles units with a tracked or wheeled movement code must roll to avoid skidding when all of the following conditions are met. The unit uses sprinting movement on a paved road bridge train types, or uses sprinting movement on, uses jump movement and end its move on, or moves more than half its move rating on ice terrain during a single movement phase. Also, if the unit is not using jump jet movements during its current movement phase, if both of those are correct, you have to see whether or not your mech skids. To see if a unit skids, its player must make a special control roll, what I typically called a PSR, a pilot skill roll, but in Alpha Strike, they call it a control roll. As soon as the above conditions are met, which we're going to pretend that they are, and the miniature has already moved 1 inch along its intended path. So, once again, we're going to move this guy down to there. So for the first portion of movement, I'm going to bring this back to 2D. We're going to move him 1 inch, so that's right there. So in order to roll the control roll for Battletech, we have to take the unit skill rating as the basic target number, and then add the target movement modifier to it. If our roll is equal to or higher than the modified target number, the unit will continue its movement normally for that turn. Otherwise, it will skid half of its movement round up. So the Phoenix Hawk has 18-inch movement. It is a target movement modifier of 2, and its skill number for this particular Battletech is 2, which is, I want to say, elite. Typically, like a regular MechWarrior, a regular skilled MechWarrior will have a skill number 4. Veterans will have a skill number 3. Elites have a skill number of 2, and greens, I think, have like a skill number of 5, I think. So this will come up more for combat for Alpha Strike, but in general, your skill number is the starting target number that you have to roll at or better in order to succeed at something. So low numbers are better. It also means that anything that is a negative number that modifies your target number are good. That means that it is making it easier for us to roll at or better than the target number. If they add to it, it's bad, because now it's increasing the difficulty that we have to hit on a 2d6 roll. So, we're at a target number of 2 starting out. We have to add our target movement modifier of 2 on top of this. That brings up to 4. So we now have to roll a 4 on a 2d6 roll, which is actually really, really good. So let's see if we can do it. We're going to use this pair of dice here, so this is the red one. Look at that, 11. Look at that. Freaking awesome. Alright, now we can continue the rest of our movement. So that was up to 18 inches, so we can grab them. Bring them out to there, and right there. 17 inches. That is a total of 18 inches right there. Boom. So if there was somebody here you want to shoot with a target number that's smaller than what he would have had if he would have shot out here, he can do that now. Let's bring it back here. Let's pretend he didn't roll so lucky. No. 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 Son of a... You're making me look bad, game. Okay. No, oh, no. We rolled snake eyes. Oh, how sad. Alright, he failed his skill roll. So, in order to resolve this now, we've moved an inch, right? We made our roll, and we failed it. So, how does this happen now? Alright. In order to determine how we skid, A skidding unit travels in a random direction based on its orientation at the start of its current movement phase. So in this case, it's facing this way. We are moving this way. This is found by rolling a 1d6. This is one of the few times we're not doing 2d6. It's just a single 1d6. And then using that number... using the number in parentheses found on the 2-inch AoE table, and aligning the direction indicated by the result of 3 or 4 to the unit's original facing. And we have to move what is it, half of its movement value rounded up. Now see, it's saying half of its movement value, so it's not the sprinting movement. I don't think it's sprinting movement, because it's saying movement. It's specifically saying MV. Our MV is 12, not 18. 18 is only when we declared a sprint. So we're just going to assume it's a 6-inch movement. If I'm incorrect, please let me know in chat. But that is how I'm interpreting that. So we're going to roll 1d6. 5. Okay. Alright, let's see here. We got the template. So you got a lot of dice and a lot of stuff here. Oh, that template's got to be somewhere. Okay. Well, let me take a look at the reference in the rulebook, just to see what they're talking about. In classic Battletech, when you roll 1d6, you typically rotate it on its hex side a number of rotations. You know, there's like a little chart showing which side it is number-wise. But they're not having us do that here. They're having us using the 2-inch AoE template. See, 1 second here. That's on page 187. We flip it over to that. Wait, what? What? Wait a minute. Hold the phone. Why don't I see the template? Book, the page you mentioned to me does not have the template, sir. Oh my god. Those templates are really important for usually like airborne ordnance. Okay, there we go. Okay, so according to the 2-inch AoE template, rolling a 3 or 4 maintains us moving forward. A 1 to a 2 has us go to the left. 5 to 6 goes to the right. Okay, so what did we roll? It's a 5. Okay, so it looks like we are going to skid this direction. We're going to skid, what was it, 6 inches? So 6 inches over there. Six inches. right there. And then I used to be able to grab this and then like hold shift. Where's it? Alt. Okay, there we go. Alt. Hey, there you go. It fell. I don't think it really matters what position your mech fell in. It does in Classic. I don't think it matters in Alpha Strike. I'm sure we'll find out here in a moment. Okay. Once the skidding ends, either because the unit simply skidded the entire distance, or via collision, the skidding unit in the movement phase has ended. Now we gotta figure out the damage. Skidding units will automatically suffer 1 point of damage for every 4 inches they have skid, rounded down to a minimum of 0. So we skidded a total of 6 inches. So that is 4 inches. Up to 4 inches is 1 point. 2 inches is an additional point. Okay, so we're going to... I'm going to put that on our Phoenix Hawk here. So we took 2 damage on the armor. Now, like I said, you usually have to roll to see whether or not your pilots take damage. That does not seem to be a thing in Alpha Strike, so that's less tracking you have to worry about. In addition to what we had just discussed, these units may strike and collide with buildings, terrain, and other units while doing so. For this reason, players should check for and apply the effects of any possible collisions before applying damage caused by the skid itself. So yeah, there's a chance you may accidentally ram an enemy unit or a friendly unit, or you may strike a building or a hillside. The possibilities are endless. And yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot more that goes into that. For the basics, we won't go over all those rules. That's much more unique to urban combat, which can be its own video section someday. Just know that if you do need to make a skidding roll, that is how you do it for movement. And yeah, at least when it comes to battle mechs, I think that was... Oh, okay. There's one more thing I should add before we move on. 2 things, actually. Okay, we're gonna go back to these guys here. They both moved more than 1 inch, so they both get their target movement modifiers. So we're gonna represent that with dice. Got a bunch of cool dice here. Some other cool dice here. We'll just grab some of these, so... Okay, so we'll grab, let's see here. The book has some rules laid out for what dice it recommends you use in order to track movement modifiers, so that way it helps speeds the game up faster. That way you can keep track of who moved, what target movement modifier they get, and what method of movement they used. So that way you can determine modifiers for combat at a glance. So white dice, this guy here, typically marks a unit that's moved 1 inch or more. Black dice are used to note a mech that is at a standstill. And red dice are used when a mech jumps. Yellow dice are typically used in order to notate that a mech has sprinted. Let's see, both of those mechs moved, so I'm just going to copy the die. one here, you moved more than 1 inch, you moved more than 1 inch. See, the Warhammer has a target movement modifier of 1. The Griffin has a target movement modifier of 2. So this is going to remain a 1 to let us know if you shoot at this guy, you have to add a 1 to your target number. We're going to switch that to 2 to let people know, alright, when you shoot at this guy, you're going to have to add 2 to your target number. If you see a die that's labeled 6, in Battletech terms, that's actually meant to be a 0. So this will typically happen on dice that are the black dice for standstill. Like, this could be the case on dice, like actual moving dice for a classic, because of the more intricacies of how movement works in that system. But for the simplified version, you typically will see a 0 modifier only if they're at a standstill, so you usually won't see that on a white dice. Now, you can use whatever color dice you want to reflect the movement types. This is just what they recommend. I typically use, like, I'll typically use, like, green for go, so movement, red for thrusters, right, for jumping, and then maybe, like, black or blue or purple for standstill, and then whatever color I feel like using for sprinting, right? Just as long as you're keeping track and you and your opponent knows the difference. Alright, so we got target movement modifiers added after moving. Okay, one additional rule we'll go over, just in case if it comes up, is what is called hold down. Ground units, like battle mechs, can get involved with what's called a hold down maneuver. So you might be behind terrain. You might be behind terrain that, if you were to orient your battle mech in such a way that you can actually take advantage of your position, reducing your profile and making it harder for an enemy to attack you, while giving you the advantage of attacking an enemy in full view. Mechs and proto-mechs will either duck or crouch, while most vehicles will take advantage of low-level cover and integral suspension control systems to settle deeper into their position. A unit must spend 4 inches of movement to find a hold-down position. The unit then rolls 2d6. On a 7 or greater, the unit will have achieved a hold-down position. This unit may subtract 2 from the target number if the unit occupies terrain with an additional movement cost, or within 2 inch of an elevation change. A unit can make hold-down attempts as long as it has enough remaining movement to pay the hold-down movement cost again. If a unit occupies a pre-made hold-down or fortified position, its hold-down is automatically succeeds. Now, a hold-down unit has a +0 target movement modifier, but gains the +1 target number modifier for any attacks made against it, unless they are from the rear attack direction. The unit is considered half its normal height for line of sight rolls. A target that is hold down cannot receive the partial cover modifier. So, like I said earlier, if these mechs are the equivalent of about 2 inches of height, level 2 size. If they get behind a 1-inch hill, they can receive a partial cover modifier bonus. We'll go over that more in the combat portion. The combat phase. However, if you do the hull down in certain areas, you can still gain a +1 target number modifier, but from any units that attack you, except for those that are attacking you from behind. Once hull down, a unit cannot move unless if it leaves the hull down position. A hull down unit must spend another 4 inches to leave the position, but no roll is required. Yeah. Okay. Now to go over the unequal number of units. I know we kind of touched on it just a little bit earlier, but we'll go in a little more detail. Yeah, the Griffin is standing right behind you. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the Phoenix Right, or the Phoenix Hawk, it's the Phoenix Right. Okay. These guys decide they're gonna get together here. And now we got some other guys that show up. We got a dragon. A stinger. There you go. We'll keep it low, no numbers, so that way it's simple to explain. So we do our initiative rolls. We'll pretend that these guys here won, the red won, blue lost initiative, so they have to move first. As you can see, there's already a discrepancy here. We have 3-2. So the way it's going to work is that we have to move the stinger or the dragon, either one. That moves first. So we'll just say you move over here. We have an unequal number of units between the different sides. This started with 2. This starts with 3. They moved 1. So now what we have to do is we have to move a number of units that's a multiplier of the lower side in order to try and even out the amount of movement between the two. Because remember, these guys are supposed to have advantage. So we moved 1 here. So let's see here. It's 2 and 3. Okay. Don't move. Now we're at 1 and 2. 2 is twice as 1. So he'll move. And then these two will move for the last portion. That way these guys and these guys finish all their movement at the same time, and not one side is doing a bunch more movement than the other, while keeping it relatively even for the sake of foresight. Now we'll do the exact opposite. These guys won initiative, these guys lost initiative. These guys have to start first. It's 3-2. It's not really a multiplier of each other, so he's going to move first. Afterwards, the Stinger can move. And now that we're at 2-1, these two can move. And then he moves last because they won initiative, right? So we don't reveal their entire hand. But we know exactly what they move, so he can counter. Now, if you have a lot more units, like say the book here has an example, side B has 5 units, side A has 8 units. They both move 1. Side B has 4 units, side A has 7 units, they both move 1. Side B has 3 units, side A has 6 units. Now that is a multiplier of one to the other. So afterwards, the side with more units will move the multiplier amount of one side to the other. In this case, side A will move 2 for every one of side B's 1. And yeah, that is how you move unequal number of units during movement phase. It takes a little bit getting used to. It can always throw me for a loop sometimes, you know. They do change this up a bit in Battletech Aces. It's kind of interesting how they do it. It's actually the exact opposite. You move multiple units until you have the sides even enough to where you can just move one on each side back and forth. But yeah, okay. I think we've covered all the necessities we've needed to for movement.